The independent television system.
A year in the life, a year full of hope, pain, triumphs, and failures.
What are you, angry?
Tuesday night at 6 on 2 and 7 CFAC Calgary.
Two and 7 News First.
Good evening, I'm Brenda Finley along with Mike Toth, Jim Hughes, and the late-night Halloween edition of News First. Tonight, of course, is Halloween, a night when traditionally there are as many tricks played as treats received. However, city police report that things have been quiet and safe so far, with no reports of major accidents or acts of vandalism. We'll have more on Halloween later on in the newscast. Things were not so quiet in the small community of Sept-Îles, Quebec today. Thousands of people, fully a third of the town, held an angry demonstration to protest the track record of their local MP, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. During the '84 election campaign, Mulroney promised to bring jobs and prosperity back to the town. And now, 32% of the residents are unemployed. Sept-Îles used to be one of the most prosperous communities in Canada before the bottom fell out of the iron ore industry. And today, 6,500 people marched and chanted their anger over what they call Mulroney's broken promises. Things fared a lot better for Deputy Prime Minister Don Mazankowski, who is in Calgary today to promote the free trade deal to Albertans. As Newsfirst David Boushy reports, Mazankowski had a captive audience.
The Deputy Prime Minister couldn't have handpicked a more receptive audience for his luncheon speech. In attendance, fellow Tory MPs, Tory MLAs, and other high-ranking Conservatives. His message to the party faithful was a familiar one. Free trade is a good deal for Alberta and a great deal for Canada. Mazankowski told the audience the agreement will create jobs, lower the cost of living, and benefit consumers. The Deputy Prime Minister also took the opportunity to lash out at critics of the deal.
It's much easier to sell fear than hope. And it's also much easier to sell despair than opportunity. But we, as Canadians who are vitally concerned about the economic welfare of our nation, must rise above this. And one thing I have to tell you, we don't have to oversell this trade agreement. It can be sold on the substance and the elements contained therein.
After his speech, Mazankowski conceded the federal government needs the help of its strongest ally in selling the deal.
Albertans are associated with businesses and enterprises in other parts of the country, and I think it's important for them to get the message to the other parts of the country. The oil industry, for example, which will benefit tremendously from this, has a tremendous spin-off benefit in Ontario and other parts of the country.
Alberta Energy Minister Neil Weber agrees the province has a role in convincing the rest of the nation that it is a good deal.
I think it's important that both governments work together to reassure and convince those Albertans, or I put it another way, we have to reassure those who have believed in it and convince those that don't.
The Mulroney government's biggest challenge is selling the trade deal to the rest of Canada, and perhaps more importantly to the U.S. Congress. And there's a lot riding on it. If the deal should fall through, political analysts say it could mark the final blow to a government struggling to increase its popularity before the next election. David Boucher, News First.
Canada's newest federal political party will choose a leader tomorrow. Delegates to the founding convention of the Reform Party of Canada in Winnipeg have two men to choose from. One is Preston Manning of Edmonton, the other Stan Roberts of Vancouver. A new opinion poll suggests that most Canadians aren't overly worried about their economic future despite the past 2 weeks on world stock markets. The Angus Reid survey discovered that 78% of those polled aren't about to change their spending habits, but that 4 in 10 consumers are planning to restrict their spending habits and 6 in 10 plan to look for safer investments. U.S. and Soviet arms control experts have just 5 weeks to put together an agreement to eliminate medium-range nuclear weapons. The big issue still to be resolved is a verification system to ensure compliance. But for now, as Ann Garrels reports, the two sides are doing a bit of celebrating over agreed-upon deal.
His work done and exhausted from his unexpected trip to Washington, Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze returned to Moscow last night, a day earlier than expected. Both sides now begin a month of intense preparations. According to Soviet officials, concern for Gorbachev's safety is the principal reason the summit will be limited to a brief stay in Washington. The Soviets also worried about embarrassing demonstrations, and that a high-profile visit to the president's ranch could be politically difficult for Gorbachev at home if there are no positive results at the summit. And while ready to do what's necessary to promote U.S. Soviet relations, the Soviets have no wish to promote Ronald Reagan. The Soviets cannot forgive him for his anti-Soviet, evil empire-style remarks. But whatever they might think about him personally, the Kremlin is now ready to talk business with the president, with both sides careful to emphasize the positive.
We are pleased with the results of the talks here in Washington. I think they are important for building a fundamentally new relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States.
There's a little bit different tone to the discussion, and that always leads me to think that people are increasingly serious about finding ways to meet each other's problems.
And problems there are. First, wrapping up critical verification procedures on the intermediate range missile agreement so that it can be signed in December. The Soviets worry about subsequent ratification by the Senate, noting their bad experience with past treaties. Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Claiborne Pell.
In the beginning it'll be tight, but in the end I think it'll go through.
Reaching the 50% cut in strategic missiles will be even more complicated. The Soviets continue to link this to restrictions on the president's space defense program.
We continue to have many difficult questions between us, and we'll need a lot of energy and efforts to surmount those obstacles.
But officials say when the leaders meet, there's a great push to get a lot accomplished. The risk of disappointment is also great. Ann Garrels, NBC News, the State Department.
Americans still aren't safe in the Philippines. That's the word today from underground communist rebels in Manila. 3 American servicemen were gunned down by communist rebels earlier this week. And today, Philippine President Corazon Aquino paid their widows a visit at the huge Clark Air Force Base. Keith Miller reports.
The widow of Air Force Sergeant Randy Davis carried away an American flag, but she left so much more behind. Philippine President Corazon Aquino attended the memorial service and told the widows that she didn't understand why these things happened. The military has a theory. The communists say some officers are losing the war in the countryside, so they are taking the insurgency into the cities. A special anti-terrorist squad has been activated to counter the threat.
We are also conducting pursuit operations in those places where these assassinations by the NPA have taken place.
U.S. personnel are restricted to base. Non-essential travel is banned. American civilians have been warned that they should be on guard too. Military intelligence reports the communists will try to strike again.
Yes, unluckily. But the government are also trying to make some moves to neutralize these people.
But most Americans didn't require any further notice to stay off the streets. The killings have stunned the American personnel here. The nightclubs and bars near the base are deserted. U.S. security patrols are taking no chances. The base commander says the restriction on travel will not be lifted soon because no one is certain what may happen next. Keith Miller, NBC News, Clark Air Force Base, the Philippines.
The world-famous Siamese twins who were separated in a landmark operation just a few weeks ago are recovering well. Benjamin and Patrick Binder underwent a 22-hour operation at a hospital in Baltimore last September. And now Benjamin is breathing on his own, and Patrick will be weaned from his respirator in a week. The West German babies were born last January, joined at the back of the head. Prince Charles and Princess Diana are about to start tongues wagging once again in the UK. The royal couple will travel to West Germany together tomorrow, and what's so noteworthy about that is that they've been living apart since September the 16th. Actually, Charles was alone again today at the wedding of his cousin, Lady Amanda Knatchbolt, who is the granddaughter of the late Lord Mountbatten. Charles has spent most of the last 6 weeks at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, while Diana has been in London with their 2 sons, William and Harry. Buckingham Palace has refused to comment on reports of trouble in the 6-year royal marriage. As we mentioned off the top of the newscast, this has been a quiet and safe Halloween in Calgary so far. There are no reports of serious vandalism or accidents. This afternoon, hundreds of kids turned out for a safe Halloween party at the Stampede Corral. There were goodies and entertainment and lots of Halloween fun. The party was sponsored by the Boys and Girls Clubs of Calgary, and all profits will go to them. So what is Halloween anyway? Bobby Batista has a special look at the legends of this day when goblins and beasties are on the prowl.
There's an eerie moon on the horizon, a chill in the air, and the sounds can't be mistaken. this night, Halloween, has been with us for more than 1,000 years, yet still, it sends a chill up your spine. The holiday began as a celebration to mark the beginning of winter. Through the years, certain events and traditions have played a part in making Halloween what it is today. Irish immigrants are said to be responsible for bringing the jack-o'-lantern to America. Legend has it, the carved pumpkins are named for a man called Jack, who had to walk the earth with his lantern until Judgment Day, because he could enter neither heaven nor hell. But looking beyond the Halloween symbols, one can understand how this day got its reputation for the weird, the scary, and the supernatural. Harry Houdini is one example. The masterful magician died on October 31st, 1926. Houdini won world fame as an escape artist. No barrier could restrain him, whether it was a straitjacket, handcuffs, or a watertight trunk. So it's no wonder that many believed when he vowed to cheat death and bring a message back from beyond.
Come on, Harry, you did so many impossible things. Do what people now think is impossible.
Every year, seances are held by those who still yearn to make contact with Houdini. And each time, that quest has turned up nothing but silence. Edgar Allan Poe didn't die on Halloween, but his writings, which conjure images of the evil and grotesque, are certainly part of the yearly celebration. The haunting melody of works like The Raven and The Murders in the Rue Morgue can strike a note of terror even in the most stout-hearted. Also associated with the terror and trickery of Halloween is Orson Welles. This year marks the 49th anniversary of his classic radio presentation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Newspaper accounts of the time are evidence that witches and ghouls are not the only things that spark fear. The radio broadcast proved so convincing, thousands of people believed Martians had actually landed in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. So on this Halloween, remember, werewolves, vampires, and ghosts aren't the only things stalking the night.
Jim Hughes is, too. Not only was it a safe and quiet Halloween in Calgary this year, it was a fairly mild one, too. Our scary weatherman is back with the forecast right after this.
Alcoholics Anonymous, may I help you?
All right. If you don't want to drink anymore, you don't have to. You just got to do something about it. Okay? There's a beginner's meeting, and you ought to go to the beginner's meeting at 7:30.
Let's see what we got in we got the workshop at 12:15 on Perry Street. That's right around the corner. Give yourself a chance to wash your face and have a cup of coffee and get
You
there.
don't want your husband to know? Don't you think he knows you drink?
I know exactly how you feel. So many times I can't count them.
We don't care if you're drunk when you go to a meeting. What we do care about is we see you there.
What makes you think they're tired of you? Well, they probably aren't tired of you. I'm a fellow alcoholic, and I certainly wouldn't be tired of you.
Could you give me your phone, and would you mind? I could get somebody maybe to call you and meet you there. We have several kinds of meetings, but let me see what kind you go to tonight, and then I...
Alcoholics Anonymous.
What's going to happen.
It works.
You could go to what's
Look us up in the phone book.
Monday on Alf.
Hi, Lynn. Hi, Lizard.
Alf helps Lynn enter a beauty pageant when Lynn's date dumps her at 6. Then on Valerie's Family at 6:30, David and Rich might be through.
From now on, David Hogan is going to start living.
David's drinking gets him locked in a closet by a friend. Then at 7, Gary Bobrovitz brings you a special Olympic report, the Olympic Legacies at 7. At 8, it's a soldier story. A special investigation takes place after a murder on the barracks. Mondays are worth watching on 2 and 7.
The Calgary Winter Olympic Games will soon be here with the 16 days of glory in February. Many believe the real glory will come after the Olympic Games are over. What legacies will the Games leave behind? In a special one-hour program, we'll examine the economic benefits for the tourist industry using the finest winter sports facilities anywhere in the world, and the emotional legacy of hosting Canada's only Winter Olympics. Olympic Legacies, the second of a 4-part series, Monday, November 2nd at 7 on 2 and 7.
I warned you, ladies and gentlemen, a scary weatherman.
Yeah.
You forget to brush your teeth before news time tonight?
Oh.
Perhaps you're on the company dental plan, Jim? What's that?
Oh, how did that happen, for heaven's sakes?
Any time to do the weather forecast, Jim?
Weather forecast, that's right, too. We had a beautiful Halloween night, as a matter of fact. It was in 1984 on this date that we set a record low when you were outside freezing your little pumpkin off at minus 25 degrees. You might remember that well. That's enough to freeze the frost off a pumpkin. And today's high reached 18 degrees in Calgary with a low at 1. There's our current conditions. You notice the winds are out of the south at 25. A little later on, when a weather front goes through us, a cold front zips through us, those winds will switch around and get quite dramatic coming from the north, and I'll tell you why in just a shake here. 9 degrees at Victoria, there's fog out on the coast there. Cloudy skies at Vancouver, 10 degrees. Through Kelowna, the interior of BC, they've got rain and precip, and that's right along that frontal line associated with the low pressure system in the central portion of the province of Alberta. You got the cloudy skies here. Then there's another low pressure system in the Northwest Territories. It's snowing through Yellowknife. Another cold pressure coming, cold front rather, coming through. This one will drift through us early tomorrow morning about 6 o'clock, and the winds will switch around coming out of the north, and they could gust up to 80 to 90 clicks as that frontal system comes through. You'll see a dramatic switch there. And then this is very cold Arctic air. Like, this is the Arctic front coming down here. Our temperature expected Monday is going to be in the 12-degree range. That's that air mass. And then the temperature for Tuesday and late Monday will be about 4 degrees, and that's that air mass. And so you'll feel the difference as those little rascals scoot through us. It's 4 degrees at Saskatoon, 5 degrees at Regina. Estevan, Saskatchewan hits the hot spot in all of Canada at, boy, what an ugly two, 21 degrees at Estevan, Saskatchewan, and 7 degrees at Winnipeg. Thompson, Manitoba has got some snow, and I might add that if you're planning on going through the Rogers Pass, Revelstoke has some precip, and there is a little bit of snow through the Rogers Pass. There's your lucky Lotto 649 numbers, and I don't know if you heard, but as of November, the minimum weekly draw on the Lotto 649 is going to be $5 million. Just another little hook to get another dollar out of Hughes's pocket. It's 1 degree at Toronto and 3 degrees at Ottawa, 4 degrees at Montreal. Then we get to the Maritimes, where it's been cloudy most of the day, 2 degrees at Charlottetown, PEI, 3 degrees at Halifax, 1 degree at St. John's, Newfoundland, 0 at Goose Bay, Labrador. Quick boo at the forecast for the Lethbridge region. Lethbridge will be cloudy tonight. Remember, when those winds gust from the north, it's going to be around upwards to 90 kilometers per hour coming from the north for the Lethbridge region, even windier than Calgary. The high near 14, cloudy and cooler Monday. Calgary will be cloudy tonight, and the overnight low near 2, high tomorrow about 12 degrees and cloudy. And again, when that other front comes through, it's going to be cooler again on Monday. That's a look at all the weather information. We've got the scary Mike Toth after these messages.
Say hello. Say hello. Say hello. Say hello. Say hello. We've got the spirit. Say hello. Come on, let's hear it. Say hello. Say hello.
Hello, Calgary.
Makes no difference where I go. You're the best hometown I know. Hello, Calgary. Hello, Calgary. Say hello. Say hello. Say hello. Say hello. Hello, Calgary. Channels 2 and 7. Say hello.
What do you think Alcoholics Anonymous is?
The place to go when you're thirsty.
I don't know.
For drinkers, I guess.
I would sit and I would drink and I would think about doing a lot of things.
Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men
and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism.
And then I would have a third martini and I'd end up going to bed.
Right. If you don't want to drink anymore, you don't have to. You just got to do something about it.
The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions.
AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes.
Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Alcoholics Anonymous, it works. Look us up in the phone book.
Okay, as Jim promised, we are back with the pearly white Mike Toth, not Tooth,
Right.
and lots of NHL.
Yeah, we had a full slate of games tonight, Brenda, in the NHL, and we're going to feature a couple of them for you tonight. And we'll start with just a classic. Boston and Montreal, the Bruins and the Habs. That is a real classic. There was no score in the first period of this hockey game, but Perry Gancher is going to get his first goal as a Canadian right there, and it's 1-0. But 56 seconds later, Jeff Courtnall scores on that shot right there. Hayward should have had that. It's 1-1. The Bruins move up 2-1. Lindsman to our man Courtnall again. That's a good shot. Hayward had problems on that one, and Courtnall makes it 2-1. Now, the Bruins lead 3-2 at this point. Late in the game when Chelios lets go a shot that Reggie Lemelin should have stopped, and the Bruins' Terry O'Reilly was a little bit upset that a penalty was called late. But at any rate, it ends in overtime, 3-3. All right, now on to Toronto, the Leafs and the Blackhawks. There's Dan Foose. He makes it 3-1 to Toronto. And we're going to see right now some good goaltending because the Leafs have been getting a lot of it. Right there, Reget, as he makes a nice glove save. The Leafs would win their third in a row tonight. Watch though as the Hawks make a nice play here, and you're going to see a great play by Mike Stapleton right there, Pat Stapleton's son. And the Chicago Blackhawks back in this hockey game. But it's 5-3 Leafs when Al Iafrate will move in right there and score his 6th of the year. And that makes it 6-3. And then Greg Terrien will get his stick right here. At first they gave the goal to Lehman, who shot the puck, but then they saw that Terrien did deflect it. All right, a former teammate meets up right here. Ricky Vive and Danny Daou, former teammates. They get into it. Look at that stick there by Vive as he greets his former mate. They drop the gloves. We're not going to show you the fight, but we're going to show you the result right there. Ricky Vive getting cut between the eyes, and the Leafs will win that hockey game. We'll look at that score in a minute, but let's go on our scoreboard tour right now to New York. Islanders 8, the Rangers 2. At one point, the Islanders led 8-0 in that contest. Dion with his 700th goal, the only bright spot for the Rangers. Pittsburgh and Quebec. First of all, we'll go to Philadelphia and Hartford, 7-4 for the Whalers tonight. And the Flyers really struggling. They're 3 games under 500. Okay, as promised, Pittsburgh and Quebec, 5-4 for the Pens. Lemieux had himself a night and a half. He had 5 points in that game. Edmonton and New Jersey, look at this. The Devils now 7-3. The Oilers have lost 3 in a row. And remember when Gretzky called the Devils a Mickey Mouse outfit a few years ago? The shoes on the other foot right now. Boston and Montreal, as we looked at, ended in a 3-3 tie as the Canadians score a late goal. Chicago and Toronto, the Leafs win 6-5, their 3rd in a row. Washington and Minnesota, a 3-3 tie there as Acton gets a couple of goals for the North Stars. And the same score between Detroit and St. Louis tonight, 3-3 now. That is a final as that game ended in overtime. Well, it's Halloween, and now a look at the darker side of hockey. This has been a very violent season so far in the NHL. We've already had a number of incidents that tarnish the game. Dave Brown and Thomas Sandstrom for one, Patrick Waugh-Slash and Warren Babe. The Devils going up in the stands in Pittsburgh the other night. All bad situations and, of course, all bad for the game.
Called the Broad Street Bullies, but the Philadelphia Flyers in the mid-70s were known for being belligerent fighters rather than cheap shot specialists. Intimidation had a lot to do with the Flyers' success, and even though many called for a crackdown on violence, eventually nature ran its course. A few years later, fellows like Jimmy Mann started making headlines. Mann left the Winnipeg bench in 1982 and received a 10-game suspension for sucker punching Pittsburgh's Paul Gardner. It was a vicious attack and eventually went to court as Mann was found guilty of assault. Since then, 10-game suspensions have been the maximum, no matter how depraved or felonious the assault. In October of 1985, Montreal's Chris Nyland got 8 games for this butt end on Rick Middleton of Boston. A few months later, Bob Probert of Detroit was given 5 games for headbutting Bob McGill of the Leafs. And the list goes on and on. What we have here in the 1980s is not a repeat performance of the Flyers' tactics of the 70s. Instead of dropping the gloves and going toe-to-toe, today's NHL hardheads are using other, more dangerous weapons. In last year's playoffs, Philadelphia's Ron Hextall used his stick like a hatchet on Edmonton's Kent Nilsson. The result? An 8-game suspension. In this year's Canada Cup, Gary Suter of the United States, number 20 on the right of your screen, retaliated with a horrible stick check in the face of a Russian player. He, too, got 10 games for his actions. Obviously, the 10-game maximum hasn't deterred others. So far this year, 5 people have been suspended for their actions, and 2 more await their verdict. Philadelphia's Dave Brown offered this stick to the head of Ranger Thomas Sandstrom the other night. But Flyers general manager Bobby Clarke felt Sandstrom had it coming.
Zito's told me numerous times that the way Sandstrom plays, someone's going to get him. He says that, admits that, and I think that happened last night, and nobody likes to see an incident like that happen. But he did spear Mark Howe earlier, and he is that type of player, and that type of player sometimes creates problems for himself.
A week earlier, this brawl between Pittsburgh and New Jersey left Penguins owner Paul Martha wondering aloud about the officiating in the NHL.
I think when the fans perceive that things are out of control on the ice, they seem to take license that allows them to do things they normally wouldn't do. It happens frequently. I mean, if you look at some of the situations we've had in the National Hockey League where things have gotten out of control in the stands, there's been unauthorized, by unauthorized in quotes, by the rules of the game, unauthorized activity on the ice.
Both Martha and Clarke will be disciplined by the NHL office for having loose lips, but the problem won't go away until the league decides to do something about these heinous crimes being committed by their hockey players. Until that's done, the sport of hockey will be looked at by many as just another blood sport.
Let's now talk about artistry on ice. The results from today's Skate Canada competition going on over at the Saddle Dome. And yes, Brian Orser took the gold in the men's singles competition, beating his American rival Brian Bottano. American Debbie Thomas beat out Elizabeth Manley to take gold in the ladies' event. Thomas had just a great long program to win. But Canada also won gold in the pairs. Christine Huff of Waterloo and Doug Ledre of Vancouver coming out on top. Well, they're calling it the biggest trade in football, at least in the past 10 years. And yeah, it's a big one. Eric Dickerson has been sent by the LA Rams to Indianapolis. The deal also involved Buffalo. Kind of a complicated one, but here's the bottom line. The Colts get Dickerson, and the Rams get 2 RBs and 6 draft choices. The Bills get the rights to linebacker Cornelius Bennett. A big trade. We're back after this.